Hello, I'm Amy from moonmindology.com and today I want to look at the European Union. So the European Union was originally a trade union that turned into something more controlling over time. From low duty trade to the introduction of standards that stop manufacturers from producing things that are not in line with EU rules. People on the left tend to support the EU and want to be part of it. However, I personally see the EU as a capitalist entity that pretends to be a little more people first than it actually is. And it's actually more interested in big business that helps them make decisions to further expand their own investments and their own monopolies. So Eurosceptics believe that Britain created most of the rules regarding human rights, so we're independent enough without the EU supporters. But EU supporters believe that the EU are better suited to make laws and decisions for Europe. The EU, as much as it's not a human, it is still an entity or a creation that was born and ratified in time and space. So as a result, we can read the birth chart like a being and understand the energies that surround it. The ascendant is in Virgo and the chart ruler goes to the second house. The most important thing here is money and lip service. And if we look at what the EU is, it's a trade union. So that's what it is. This is all to be expected. Of course, this is also about consumption. So they are probably interested in foods as well as a entity. The 10th house ruler goes to the second house, which is so good for earning, reputation and communications, as well as banking and loans. And Mercury in the second is great for giving, importance, abilities to learn, and also great speech. So speech is all about how we communicate with each other. In a human chart, this could be somebody who speaks many foreign languages, and the EU, you could say, does. It encompasses many languages and many cultures, and this is all great for marketing, which is what the EU is all about. It's foreign marketing and trading. So Mercury is in a Parivartana yoga with Venus, and this is so incredibly strong, and these planets are more likely to produce positive results when they are activated. Venus in the first house brings a lot of grace and a lot of charm, and this is why the union is so popular. However, Venus is debilitated, so there can be an overindulgence and questionable morality in order to keep up appearances. And there can be a link to fine arts, and as we know, relationships are important for a union. This placement can also bring riches and luck. And there's an innate ability to communicate ideas and gather wealth. The sun is in the second house. A malefic here can sometimes burn a hole in one's pocket and create problems with security. And the sun is debilitated here as well, so this can cause even further problems. The sun is the karaka for the king or the leader, so there can be problems with leaders not following what is best for the EU as a whole. And this in turn can create some financial issues and some problems with communications. When there are weak planets in the second house, there can be money made through questionable means. And I would say that there is undoubtedly some corruption that is perpetrated by the people who are very, very high up. The ruler of the 12th is in the second, and that can bring some financial instability and the possibility of speaking lies. But there can be problems in early existence that creates problems far into the future. Jupiter in the second can bring wealth and money, and it really does bode well for security. So this can uplift the sun and make the aforementioned problems less pronounced, but there will still be there in some way, shape or form. The ruler of the 4th and the 7th is in the second, which can be problematic and give money issues with Jupiter. There can be money through business as well, but that money comes in a relation to land, real estate, agriculture and vehicles. Jupiter aspects the 10th house, which can really give a rise to reputation and success of this entity. And there is also a Jupiter aspect to the 5th, which is about creativity. Mercury is also retrograde, which can create problems with peers in order to strengthen communication abilities. So that money can be made. And this is quite a nice example. Mars is in his own sign in the 3rd house, which gives bravery and power, and there's a great competitive drive which can be absolutely unstoppable. This is great for leadership and expression. I would also link this to some kind of sport as well, and I'm not too au fait with sport, but this would give a great ability in sporting. I know that football is really popular throughout all the EU countries. The EU is most likely unwavering in its direction. So it stands firm in what it believes and what it is designed for. Pluto is in the 3rd house as well, on the back of Mars, and this is very powerful for expression, and it gives incredible power in communication as well as with the media. And this also gives the EU a great ability to control general and social media. So Pluto and Mars together, they can be very aggressive and violent. We have to be very mindful when these planets are activated. So if Mars is activated in a dasha or Pluto is transited or aspected, this can make this house come true. Rahu is also in the 3rd house, and this really expands Pluto and Mars, and this is so powerful in technology and computers. So they will have incredible power in dictating in matters regarding technology. And Rahu is also the character for foreigners, which is what the EU is all about, is foreign communications. But with all these malefics in the 3rd house, there can be problems with siblings. And a sibling to an entity like the EU would be its immediate borders. So there could be problems with Switzerland, part of the Balkans, Norway, Belarus, Moldova, Russia, now the UK. There will be problems whenever a house is activated, of course. The EU is currently in the dasha of Rahu, which explains why there have been some border problems. And it will be really, really interesting when it goes into the dasha of Venus in 2025. Rahu aspects the 7th and the 11th houses, which will expand all of the meanings of those two placements. And this is why we can link this to successful groups and people, as well as expansive and material contracts. There's a direct aspect between the moon and Mars by opposition, which is a Chandra Mangala yoga, and that brings great wealth, but at the cost of relationships with women. So I would say this could be translated into female leaders, or with the moon, it's the general public. The moon is in the 9th and exalted, which gives great luck and power. And this is the house of law, religion and philosophy, and the moon will give great talents in these areas. Of course, the EU does define laws and philosophies. And this is also about foreign culture, which is a massive component of the EU. This combination is incredible for wiggling out of legal battles. No wonder Britain is having such a hard time to make a deal work, because it's always going to legally go into the hands of the EU with this aspect. The moon is pretty bright as well, which is very good. And women can really prosper in the leadership roles of the EU. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of female leaders at the top. With Kate here, there can be an interest in things that are out of this world, but there can also be a loss of the law and philosophy. The moon creates instability. So there can be a lot of movement in this house. And there can be links to foreign groups as well as mixing with spirituality or religion. Saturn is in the 5th, and this is about intelligence and the thought process. And the brains behind the EU are slow thinking tacticians. When they act, they do so with mindfulness. But there can be cases of divorce, as Saturn does aspect the 7th house of marriage and contracts. Incidentally, the EU was in the dasha of Rahu and Saturn when the UK left the EU. The EU will profit more from long-term investments, so short-term business plans and agreements they make have caused problems and result in a loss of investment. And there is a clear focus and interest in politics as well as benefits from wealthy people. Uranus is in the 4th, and this can create some instability with security, and there can be gains and losses through the borders. And in a human chart, this person could be nomadic, which matches up with the way that the EU spreads itself around. It belongs to not one nation. It is a accumulation of nations. Neptune is in the 4th, so this can create deep secrets as well as security issues. And I would say that the borders are really uncertain and constantly moving. And I wouldn't be surprised if there may have been some kind of border scandal at some point for the EU, or if it hasn't been already, it could be in the future. Due to the ownership of this house, this could be triggered by a Saturn Dasha. The EU is currently in the Dasha of Rahu and Mercury, which can bring border problems, as I said. But of course, they have had issues. And there's been issues with Ukraine and Russia. And this did have something to do with EU membership. In 2024, it's going to be going into the Dasha of Rahu and Ketu, which can be the indicator of relationships, as well as activating laws and philosophies. So there can also be powerful women, as well as elements of aggression. I don't think this does particularly bode well, as there could be a lot of money making opportunities, but the public could be quite animated. In 2025, it's going into Rahu Venus, and Rahu is debilitated, which can bring out the worst of materialism, problems with borders, but Venus is also debilitated in the 1st house, and this could really be a time where the health or the head of the EU starts to fall apart, and there can be some issues, and it could be over border concerns and differing points of view. Pluto is in the 5th, and it's going to be there for the next 30 years or so, and that can bring changes and transformations in the directions of the EU, and there may be alterations to goals. Neptune is in the 7th, which really can make contracts and business relationships quite foggy and a little bit confusing. This will be further ramped up when Ketu enters the 1st house. Uranus is in Aries, and it has been there for quite a while, and this could have contributed to sudden changes and scandals around the EU. Rahu is currently in Aries as well, which is the 8th house, and would have been expanding all kinds of scandals, taxation, science, banking during this time. However, when it goes into the 7th, it can bring influential people and contracts. But Neptune is there, so it could be a lot of illusions and a bit of trickery. Ketu is going to be in the 1st house, which can create an identity model which leads to a crisis of faith. And this could trigger some kind of transformation in the way that the EU works, and maybe even they could change their goals. Saturn's in the 6th, and that's the house of hard work. So there could be problems with those who serve the EU. There could be issues with the way it runs. Also, there could be legal problems, and there could be elements of debt during this time. Jupiter's going to be in Aries, which is also the 8th house. So this can really magnify any scandal that's been activated, but it can also bring in tax money from banking. With Uranus, Rahu and Jupiter all in the 8th house, this could be very, very good for scientific discoveries, as well as expanding land ownership. If you have any comments, please leave a comment for me. Please like and subscribe if you like my content. Of course, if you want a reading from me, head over to moonmindology.com, where you can book an appointment. But thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much. Bye.